oldest daughter sent me a text. Someday I'd like it if you did an interview video of yourself, talk about your parents, your kids, your grandkids, where you were born, raised, lived, stuff like that, please. It will probably be a multi-part video. First off, it'll be as accurate as I remember it. My parents aren't around anymore, so they can't tell me if my memories are correct or not. It started in Joliet, Illinois, and I believe that this first video will probably all be around Illinois, my life in Illinois. I was born February 20th, 1954. According to my birth certificate, I was born in Joliet, Illinois at 7:59 a.m. My parents, Faye Earl Ketner, age 44, and my mother was Ina Pearl Byram Ketner, and she was 29 years old. My mother was born December 19th, 1924, and my father, he was born April 28th, 1910. My mother passed away on December 12th, 1970, and she passed in Phoenix, Arizona. And my father, he passed on April 14th, 1962, and he passed in Joliet, Illinois. My father, he passed when I was 8 years old. He was sitting at the dining room table. We had a separate dining room, and my mother was in the kitchen washing dishes. She was talking to my father, and he just didn't answer. And she finally went in and checked on him, and he was gone. I've heard her tell the story that he had been to the doctor about a month before. The doctor told him that if he didn't quit smoking, he was only going to live about a month. Just about a month later, he was gone. We lived at 113 Ferdinand Street, Joliet, Illinois. The house, the property, was owned by the Ketner family. After my father passed away, the family decided that they didn't want my mom and me living there, so basically they evicted us. And I don't remember much about the place we lived after that. I don't have any memories there, but there on Ferdinand Street, I have some memories. I was only 8 years old when we moved out of there, maybe 9, but I think I was still 8 when we moved out of Ferdinand Street. It was on a dead-end street. At the end of the street was a creek, and I remember playing in that creek. And I had a friend at the other end of the street who I was pretty close with. He was like my best friend, and his name was Johnny Vasquez, and we used to hang out all the time. Behind his house was a railroad track, and we used to go up there and play on the railroad track, and we'd run all over the neighborhood. But there on Ferdinand Street, I remember there being a large front porch that was all screened in. I remember sitting out there and watching thunderstorms and sometimes hailstorms. I actually remember sleeping out there a few times. It was pretty cool. Now this is a story that I've heard. I don't remember if I remember any of it, or I just remember being told it so many times, or hearing it told so many times that it's in my mind. But I used to have a pedal car, and I was pedaling by this big pile of leaves that my father was burning, and he and my mom were sitting on the back steps, and I asked him if that was hot, and he says, well, touch it and find out. And I leaned over and tried to touch it, and the pedal car fell over. I fell into the leaves, and we went to the hospital. I don't know how bad I was burnt, but I got burnt. And I never reached over and put my hand in a pile of burning leaves again. My father, I'll have to admit, he spoiled me. I remember one year for Christmas I got this. It was a gas station made out of pressed metal. You'd play with it with little play cars. I do remember that. Another thing I remember that he bought me, and this was one of the, I had to be 7 or 8, probably 8 when that happened. There in Joliet there was a toy store, and he would take me there to the toy store, and I saw this airplane that was made out of vacuum formed plastic, and it was huge. It had to have at least a 3-foot wingspan, maybe more. I don't remember. But I wanted that thing, and he bought it for me. Now, my parents were by no means well off. Probably poor would be a better way to put it. I know he bought me a lot of toys. I remember another airplane that was big too, and it had to be at least that big, maybe even bigger, that an uncle of mine built. Don't remember the uncle's name, but this thing was made out of wood, and it was heavy. It was never designed to fly. The plastic one was a rubber band powered. You wind up the prop and then let it go, and it had enough power to get up off the ground, and I'm sure it didn't last very long. But anyway, the wooden plane, it was never intended to fly. I don't think it was even powered by anything. It was just kind of a big old model. I remember playing with that thing a lot too. I remember in the backyard, we had a deep backyard. And in the back corner there was a hole out there. And I remember Johnny and I, we'd go out there and we dug that thing out and put a roof over it, and that was our fort. I also remember that my dad had in one of the downstairs bedrooms, he had a train set up. It was just on plywood table, and the train was, I'm guessing it was a Lionel, I don't know for sure, but it was all black. Everything was black. He would run it around. I don't think I got to play with that very much, but I got to spend time with my dad there in the train room. My father had a 1955 Plymouth, and I think he bought that car brand new. Don't know for sure, but that was his car, and my mom drove the older car. It was a 1940 Plymouth. I do remember both of those cars. And down at the end of another street there in the neighborhood, I remember there were some guys who built hot rods. I remember this old Ford that they had. It was probably like a 1950, 49 or 50 Ford. They chopped the top off, made a roadster out of it. I remember that. Ferdinand Street now is underneath the freeway. Assume the state bought it. There's a freeway there now. And we used to walk to school. Don't remember exactly how far it was, but I do remember walking to school all year long, including in the snow. I remember having a scarf wrapped around my face, and there was ice on the outside of my face from my breath breathing. One year, we were walking to school. I'm pretty sure it was Johnny and me. And we were throwing snowballs, making snowballs and throwing them at stuff. I remember this dump truck. He was driving down the road. We got the bright idea of throwing snowballs at his truck. and his window was part way down, and threw a snowball and hit this poor guy right in the side of the head. He slammed on his brakes, and we took off running. Oh my, I hope I didn't hurt the guy, but we had a good laugh over that. I had a cousin that lived a block or so away. I don't remember exactly how far it was, but it was well within walking distance. And I used to play with his kids, Athena and Kathy and Tim Ketner. I remember playing with them a lot. I remember my dad worked in a gravel pit. He ran a crane, a digger, that was mounted to a railroad car. And this gravel company had several of these, I guess. But my dad was the oldest one that ran one of these things. And there was a rocking chair up on top of the cab of this digger, this crane. They called him the old man. One other thing I remember is my dad would take me out to the local airport, and we would watch airplanes take off and land. I remember there was a helicopter there, and I was so fascinated by a helicopter that I've always had an interest and an appreciation for helicopters. Airplanes too, but more helicopters. I'm surprised I never have ridden in one. Had the opportunity once, but financially I couldn't justify it. After my father passed away, my mom had a hard time, and I remember her making gravy, and we had it on white bread and gravy. I remember that. Had that a lot. Had potatoes and gravy a lot. Of course, you know, at age 8, 9, even 10, you know, I didn't really understand what was going on. I know I sure missed my dad. I remember we went to a Church of God there in Joliet, Illinois. Big white building, had a basement. I remember the Sunday school classes were in the basement. That's where I met my first girlfriend, I guess. She was my friend. She was a girl. I remember we used to talk about getting married and having a horse ranch in Colorado. Of course, after we moved, I lost contact with her. It was over. That little dream was over. But it was cool. I liked her a lot. Puppy love, I guess they call it. And I do remember going through Colorado later in life, and what a beautiful place it was. I don't remember why we talked about Colorado. Maybe I saw a picture of it or something. I don't know. That was a memory that I still have of Joliet. I remember we looked at a house my dad was interested in buying, and it was out of town a little ways. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it had a apple tree in the front yard that had 5 different kinds of apples on it. I don't think any of us ever heard of anything like that. Nowadays it's not that uncommon, but back then I always thought that was pretty cool. Well, after living in Illinois for a couple more years, my mother decided that we were going to move closer to her father. Her father was E.E. Byram, not the famous minister, but the grandnephew of the famous E.E. Byram. I believe he was named after him. My grandfather was a minister, but he wasn't the E.E. Byram. And he was living in Phoenix, Arizona. So my mom, she decided we were going to move out there. And I think she pretty much sold everything we had. And I remember we rode the train out there from Illinois to Phoenix. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in the summertime when we moved. And we were on the train for several days. I don't remember a whole lot about that, but I do remember when we got off of the train in Phoenix and we came out of the station, it felt like we were walking into an oven. It was hot. Well, that's about all the memories I can think of Illinois. If more come to me, I'll add them into this clip or add them into another clip. It was early in the morning, I think around 8 o'clock if I remember right. If I remember. Cut. My mother's maiden name is Ina Pearl Ketner. My mother's maiden name was Ina Ketner. Damn. Cut. My mother's maiden name was Ina Pearl Byram, and my father's name was Fay Earl Ketner. Cut.